Okay. What Sunday is today? Christ the King Sunday. How many of you knew that? Oh, very good. How many of you didn't have that on your calendar? It is not something that we often talk about, right? We don't have an Advent box waiting. I mean, we don't have those little calendars that mark the days for Christ the King Sunday, right? So let me tell you what Christ the King Sunday is all about. First, it's the last Sunday of our year, and I'll get to that in a minute. But second, it's fairly new in the church calendar. It was created in 1925. 1925. It comes from Pope Pius XI. He lived in Italy, Pope, right? Well, right. And he was living in Europe, and during that time, that was after World War I, he was very, very worried because Mussolini had risen to power. He wasn't worried about Mussolini in particular. He was worried about this rising authoritative rulers. And he could see that war might be on the surface, and he did not want to relive World War I. He knew others were close behind Mussolini, and that this authoritative rule, was built on fear and coercion, and the idea that your worth depended on how useful you were or obedient you were to those who were in charge. And so, he created this Sunday to remind the church that we have one ruler that we give our authority to. Only one. Jesus. And that Jesus lives a kingship way different than our worldly leaders do. One defined by love and mercy always. Today is also the last Sunday of the church year. So it's like the church's New Year's. And every New Year's Eve, there's always some montage on the computer or on the TV show or whatever it is about what has happened in this prior year. What has this prior year been about? And so I'd like for us today to kind of do a montage of what this past year has been about under the idea of the Gospel of Luke. Every single year, we rotate who our lens will be for the year. What gospel will be the lens for that particular year? And we have a 3-year cycle, and this was year C, more knowledge than you probably need, but hey, in trivia, you never know, right? This is year C, and year C has Luke as its lens. And so if I were to do a whole think back about all of the Gospel of Luke, I believe that there is one thread that unifies the whole Gospel of Luke. And it is Jubilee. Jubilee. That's what the whole Gospel of Luke is about, that Jesus is the Jubilee. Now, Jubilee, when we look at the Bible's definition of Jubilee, it comes from Leviticus 25. It's where God commands a whole reset of Israel's life. For every 50 years, all debts are supposed to be forgiven. Land is returned to the original families. Captives are freed. The entire system is set so that inequity doesn't become permanent. It was supposed to be this vision of how God's people would live according to God's kingdom. So they built in a reset button so that everybody got to be back to where they were. Think about that in this world. Imagine that in your life, a reset button. Suddenly, you are given the land that you have originally, whatever that might mean or look like, We would have to really be creative in the United States, wouldn't we, of what that justice would look like? All debts forgiven. All of those things that enslave you set you free. Imagine that. And that is what Jesus was talking about all through his ministry, that God's reign of Jubilee is supposed to happen now, here, today, in this moment. And we knew these clues about Jubilee even before Jesus was born. Mary walks up to Elizabeth, her cousin, and she sings this beautiful song, even before Jesus was born, about how God was going to reorder the world. The powerful will be brought down, the lowly lifted up, the hungry fed, the forgotten remembered. It's Jubilee in the form of a song. That was even before Jesus took his first breath. And when he grew into a man, he went to Nazareth, his hometown, and his first sermon was from Isaiah. And he says, that, the word from Isaiah was, good news to the poor, release the captives, freedom for the oppressed. This is the year of the Lord's favor. And he says, today, this is fulfilled. He's not talking about some poetic or spiritual measure. He's talking about how he wants that to happen now, today. And Jesus embodied it in his ministry. And later in Luke, he walks into a dinner party where a woman with a particular reputation. Once you get it in your head, it sounds different than it should. There's no getting it out. The room, you can imagine, here's all these leaders, and they're judging her, right? Because they know her history. And they have these like imaginary ledgers holding everything against her. And what does Jesus do? He sees her. He speaks to her. He restores her dignity right there in the middle of all of it. He returns her to her community rather than pushing her fully out. It's a vision of what Jubilee should look like in action. And then today we arrive at today's gospel, a place where you wouldn't imagine Jubilee to be even part of it, Golgotha. I mean, here Jesus is being crucified. This is Rome's way of maintaining order. It's their way of saying, hey, we hold the last word. Caesar is the only king. Yet, even at the cross, he refuses to give in to that system of domination. The man who has nothing left of his time to reorder his life, to repair what he has done, asks him to simply remember him. And what does Jesus say? I've got you. Today you will be with me. Jesus, that forgiving, merciful, loving God, all the way to the end. See, that's what Jubilee is about. That's the king who we are called to proclaim today. Not a king that protects the world as it is, but a king that interrupts with love and mercy every step of the way. Not one that clings to power, but one that gives dignity. Not one that keeps the score, but one that always loves, releases, and renews. Okay, that's great. What does that mean? What does that mean for you and me? First, I think it changes how we are supposed to see ourselves. You see, we, like that woman, live in a community that always has a judgment. We live in a world where you have to earn everything. And so sometimes it clouds how we see ourselves. And if we have a God who loves us no matter what, who we are, the best part of ourselves and the worst part of ourselves, every second of our lives, then we should be fully restored in that love. It tells us that we shouldn't be ashamed. And that shame, it's really, really powerful. Sometimes I walk around remembering my mistakes, my failures, and sometimes I let it define me. I know I'm not alone. It just narrows your vision of who we can be in this world. We are not the sum of what didn't work out. We're the sum of God's love. Second, it's supposed to change how we see each other. I mean, just as we have a ledger for ourselves, we do it for others too, right? Because that's the world we live in. Those quiet tallies of what someone said, or when they disappointed us, or it just gets frustrating and hard. We are supposed to remember love and mercy is at the center of everything we see in ourselves and those around us. So, what does that look like? Well, you have a great weekend to practice this. Thanksgiving. Thanksgiving is a time where all parts of families gather or not gather, which in itself is another sign of that, right? And sometimes those families have different perspectives. And sometimes when you sit down at the meal, you become the age of wherever your family was, right? Sometimes people say things and it just, it's perfect because you know that you remember something and you go into this world that is not good at all, right? It's these old family patterns we tend to lean into around Thanksgiving time. This is our opportunity to remember how much we love each other. To not let the old patterns under the surface define what it can be. So, here it goes. Choosing patience, right? When the conversation starts to slip sideways, choosing in those moments to see the love that is present even if it's not coming out of someone's mouth. To help before anyone asks. To take a breath before responding. Jubilee is that kind of work. It feels so small, but if everyone were to do these little small steps every part of our lives, that Jubilee would be so clear to see in the world around us. And that's what we're called to do because Christ is King. That's the only King we're called to have our allegiance to. And so after we've had our practice, let us remember that when we return on Sunday, it's a new year. That we've already stepped towards those parts of love and mercy and joy and bring on what God might be calling us in this new year. Seriously, calling. Amen.